Alrighty. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. This is Raph. Welcome down the security rabbit hole to another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. I have a fun. We're gonna try not to make this super depressing or make you super angry today, but I make no promises. I say we'll try, and that's we're gonna leave it. We've got a guest that as many of our guests here and many of my fun conversations start with somebody that I started originally following on LinkedIn for a bit. Realized we have the same just burn it all down mentality in many cases. It fits with the podcast sometimes. So we said, hey, let's record this. So, all right, Jim, howdy, James, welcome back. How's it going, guys?
It's going well.
Yeah, man, it's good.
Ready?
Busy.
You're ready for this?
I'm ready. Anytime you say we have a burn it down mentality, I'm like, yes, let's do this.
James has already got the lighters. Like, where are we going?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So my guest before I tell you my guest. So this is very likely to be a two-parter. So buckle in if this actually ends up being a two-parter. It's going to depend on how long this conversation goes, but it will be fun. So first off, welcome, Howard. And it's funny that you typoed your name, but we left it because it's funnier that way. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like, when you typo your own name, the cross you have to bear is you have to carry it for the remainder of the meeting.
Yeah, you just have to. So tell people. Tell people who you are, what you do, because I'm sure everybody knows you, but maybe not everybody.
Sure. Well, first, thanks for the possibility that people know me. I love that. I'm Howard Holton. I'm the CEO of GigaOm. For those who don't know GigaOm, we're an analyst firm. We've been around forever. We were started back in the day of like pre-TechCrunch by a gentleman named Om Malik. The funny part is about half of the people that know us recognize us for our radars, which is kind of our marquee product. The other half remember Om's amazing parties back in the day. Wish me luck. I'm happy to bring them back as long as finances allow. I've been doing this for a long time. I got started when I was 11. I wrote a piece of software called Plead Perfect. My dad had a law office. I wrote a piece of software for WordPerfect called Plead Perfect. And then, I was an old Novell NetWare guy, and I've kind of been around forever. 20-year CIO, CISO, CTO veteran. I spend a lot of time railing against the stupidity in the industry, which is why I like being an analyst.
Which is why you belong here. So listen, Novell NetWare. Oh, where did we go wrong after Novell, and why? Why did we abandon the greatest operating system perhaps to ever live?
I mean, we did it in fairness. Like, the CEO of Novell really had a hard-on for Bill Gates and wanted to go head-to-head. So he bought WordPerfect and he bought Corel.
Yep.
Remember Corel Draw.
And
literally said, I'm going to go toe-to-toe with Microsoft. Well, the problem is you can't. Now you have split brain syndrome. Where do you put your money? Where do you put your time? Where do you put your funds? And how do you keep people focused when you have no window to operating system, really, right? And at that point, Windows was a juggernaut. And he kind of did it a bit to himself. I still think 4.1's a better directory service than early Active Directory.
Yeah, dude, 4.1 was 4.1, 4.1.1, and then 5 was arguably not the thing that we wanted. But like 4.1, I always thought NT4 was a pretty stable operating system by and large, right, for the time. But like, I had Novell machines and Novell farms that ran literal years between reboots, and Microsoft couldn't touch that with a 50-foot pole. Like, I still tell the story about the one box that was during a renovation of a customer was walled in between two pieces of drywall in a wall, and we discovered that when we came back to do maintenance on it 18 months later. We're like, where's the machine? They're like, I don't know, somewhere around here. It was in a wall. It was happy. He didn't care that we didn't know where it was. Hadn't been rebooted. Nobody touched it. Just ran. File services, directory services, printer services. It just ran.
Indestructible.
Yeah, it just didn't care.
It didn't care.
Just kept going.
And Howard, you're dead spot on. When they started trying to compete at the PC level,
yeah,
and they sacrificed the server, You know,
Yeah.
up until that point, you know, you had to go get a Unix pizza box, you know, to do real stuff. And then Novell came along and completely changed that paradigm.
Yep.
And they had Microsoft on their heels for a long time on the server side. And then once they tried to do Corel and all that kind of stuff, it all went sideways. And then, of course, Active Directory took over.
Yeah.
Yeah, arguably, Microsoft wasn't even on their heels. They simply didn't have an answer.
No, not at all. Zero. They had no server.
Well, and I would argue that NT wasn't a response really to Novell because it was nowhere near that mature. It was a response to IBM's OS2 attempt.
That's true.
OS2 Warp.
Yeah, and the only reason I say that is because they had about the same application compatibility.
100%.
I don't know if you remember trying to get stuff to run on NT351, but it was not amazing, and the hardware compatibility was even worse.
Try running 351T. Remember 351T when?
Oh God, no.
I don't. Luckily, I remember the HCL.
It was Citrix. It was meant to be the early terminal servers.
The terminal version, yeah. I know you wanted this to be an hour long, but I got to go see my therapist now. I'm sorry. The PTSD is coming back.
Yeah, 100%.
This feels like therapy, though. This is good. We're just gonna get this all out. At the end of this, we're all just gonna hug it out. And James is probably sitting there thinking, "What are you guys talking about?"
Yeah, I didn't care about that stuff back then.
He's just
listen. The oldest platform, I think I've said this a couple times on the show, the oldest platform I remember working on that I absolutely hated at the time but wish we could go back to was the old Acer Altos. Because those things ran on machines the size of small refrigerators. You had to sacrifice a small piece of electronic to make sure that this hard drive spun down and spun back up when you right? But there was, short of throwing it in the bucket of water or setting it on fire, there were very few things you could do to break it, electronically from a user perspective. It was amazing. And I don't know, this is just sort of a good place to start really on this conversation about the cybersecurity marketplace, because it's sort of just kind of the same thing, right? We started simple. We had problems. We solved them. They were good, solid solutions. And then people started inventing solutions for problems that didn't exist. Venture capital got word that, hey, if you invested in 9 things and just one of them got some customers, you know, it's kind of like going to Vegas, except probably better odds anyway. Right. And so you end up with these bets, and we are now at a place where I think, Howard, maybe tell me if you agree with this. You know, the Earth has a carrying capacity, right? The amount of humans it can support before we start having food shortages and all sort of natural resource problems. I imagine every industry, every corner of the marketplace has its own carrying capacity, and it feels like we've exceeded cybers.
I mean, yeah, like I said before we started, it feels like it's 2008 without the acquisition cycle. If you remember, 2008 was it was like the big inflection cycle in cyber where people were literally making stuff up. They're working at Cisco, they make something up on the, at the happy hour, they leave Cisco, they start a company, they're acquired 7 days later. It never does anything. It's just got a neat website. You know what I mean? And it kind of feels a little bit like that. Like everybody and their mother has started a security company. And it's interesting, as an analyst, my first question is, cool, who's going to buy that? I get that you identified a problem because you were a SOC analyst somewhere, and the tools you were using didn't do this thing. But do you understand why anybody buys anything? The problem they're trying to solve in the corner office when they make a purchase, because yours doesn't solve that problem in any way, and now you're just more noise.
We have certainly gotten to, we have most certainly gotten to that point, because there are, I think over the last 10 years, we started in a place where we were covering the fundamentals, and things got crowded. And so you have but how do I put this? You had conglomerates. You had the McAfee, which did endpoint security, web proxy, this thing, IDS, and that thing. And then somebody came along and said, I can do that tiny little sliver better than you guys can. I'm going to do a startup. and that worked for a bit. And I would go so far as to say that still, I'd say works. That still flies, but like a little bit, because in the '08 cycle, right? Like you said, you'd get bought, and whether that little thing worked or not. But the further we got from that '08 big boom, we have more of these niche players that solve very, very, very small slivers of problems for increasingly smaller TAMs, right? You've got an increasingly smaller addressable market that has this particular problem, that is going to be willing to spend money on that particular problem, or that isn't willing just to say, you know what, my Palo Alto or my McAfee or my, I don't know, name another vendor, already does something like that. I'm not going to go spend money on something new that does just that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we're as an industry, we are all about the white space. Like the entire tech industry is about the white space, right? Can I find enough elbow room between the vendor to the left and the vendor to the right of this problem that I can wedge myself in there? And that is a fine strategy, again, when the acquisition cycle is high. The problem, I think, comes back to, I was having a conversation with somebody, I really liked their tech. And I was like, cool, so what are you displacing? And they're like, no, we're net new. Okay, cool. No one's going to buy that.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have enough money to solve the problems that I have today. I have yet to meet a CISO, and I sat with the CISO from Amazon and had a conversation with him about it. And I'm like, dude, of everyone I've ever met, you have the most capability for infinite budget. Do you have enough money? And he went, hell no. I can't hire enough people. I don't have the right things. I can't solve all the problems. Right, of course. Well, if you can't, then the rest of us are up a creek without a paddle.
Right.
Right? So the problem isn't, does the problem exist that these guys are trying to solve? The problem is, does the money exist to actually solve the problem? And how do you get a CISO to understand where they should spend the money? And it isn't going to be, we're going to come displace your Palo Alto spend, right? We're going to come displace your insert name of large vendor, right? Your Cisco spend, your whatever.
Well, it's also it's not just the problem, but the priority or seriousness of that problem that is often overinflated, right? Like everybody's coming out providing these solutions, and to your point, somebody was sitting in an office or in a SOC someplace, and they're like, "Wow, this thing, I could solve this here, and this was a problem for me." But to try to get that out to organizations, and they're like, I mean, sure, it's a problem, but it's not our problem, or it's not the problem that we're going to switch our focus away from XYZ over here so we can go address this one little niche thing. You know what I mean? Like that. I think that's where we see a lot of the hang up is that, sure, they're problems, but the way that they're sold, they're not the problem that we think they are.
Yeah, but I want to chime in, because isn't that exactly what's happening? And people are buying. That's why we're having a mushroom cloud effect of vendors, right? So I mean, I think we're almost thinking about it logically, which is sort of the problem. And I think to your point, right, is we're very much white space, plugging things in. We're always, vendors are looking for something, but they're doing it because people are buying it and people are investing in those things. The subjectivity of security has gotten to the point where it's like, oh wait, I do want a new knob over here. Or I do want a new knob. And I agree. I think there's quickly getting to a point, CISO saying, like, for example, you said this person doesn't have enough, right? Kind of thing. So that means there is still a demand to, like, I don't have enough to do things. I think people are buying these things.
Howard, you said something.
People are absolutely buying things, but like people bought Yugos. You know what I mean? Like people bought cars that exploded when you bumped a traffic cone, right? And caught on fire on Tuesdays when you started it before the sun was up. You know what I mean? Like there's the old saying, right? There's an ass for every seat. That's really true in sales, right? So the question isn't are people buying it? The question actually should be, are they being sold or are they buying? And that's a very, very, very different thing when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Are you actually seeking this thing to solve this problem, discovering it, and then reaching out, or are you just buried under the onslaught and every now and again, ding, 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 it rings, right? People.
So
only
who's the evil community?
Because,
yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I don't think it's an evil community, right? I just think there's a lot of people that are flying by the seat of their pants, as it were. Right? There's not a lot of true thoughtfulness put into the stuff that we do. And so, I don't know about you, but the first time I got a CIO job, no one said, hey, here's the manual on being a CIO. They just kind of said, by the way, you're responsible for a budget and a ton of people. Don't screw it up.
Pretty much.
And then walked away. And I was like, wait, okay, yay the boss, I guess, and you just kind of do the best you can. And I don't, there's not enough paper. I don't have enough paper in my house to document the number of mistakes I've made in my career that I wish I could go back and do again, because I wasn't thoughtful, because no one explained how, my world now worked. And I think the problem is probably more that than it is the kind of the other.
I want to go back to something that you said, Howard, and you said, we're all fighting for white space, which I think is true. And I think there's two ways to find white space. Either go into a completely novel idea where you say, boy, I've seen this problem over and over and over again. I've got a solution for this. Or the thing I think I'm seeing more than anything is, man, nobody does this tiny little sliver well. I'm going to develop that into its own market or try, right? So we've got increasingly more specificity on because it used to be oh, hey, we've got endpoint, and then we've got endpoint gets segmented into the functions inside of an endpoint, and then we've got supersets of functions inside of the entire endpoint. And so we're not finding white space, we're creating it. And that's why people that read Gartner and Forrester and all those have to continue to find more and more creative ways of labeling what they do, because you start, and I've worked for companies that are like this, that go, wait a minute, you guys do this, you guys are basically this thing over here. No, that's legacy, or that's a different thing. We actually do something totally different that's just like this, but 1% different.
Yeah, that as a Gartner Forrester competitor, the number of vendors that are constantly coming to me going, hey, we do something totally new. This is what our space is called. And I go, no, if I have to label your space, it just goes under the heading of bullshit. The truth and the reality is, every time someone makes up a category, they're trying to avoid the competitive conversation.
Correct.
And we need to have more competitive conversations, not fewer competitive conversations, right? There absolutely is, there's a difference between ZTNA and SASE and SSE. However, they're also all subcategories of the other. It's a Venn diagram, not a column, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Right? And what we should be able to do is have a conversation about what these things are, what they mean, and what they mean to you, the buyer, so you can go, oh, that's the one that I need. And that conversation isn't just a list of features, but it also has to be where are you in your maturity curve? What are your needs? What is your company
nobody
size?
Talks about.
What space do you have available, right? It's a really hard conversation, in fairness. I put together, I'm a big AI guy. Please don't end the podcast now. But I put together a decision tree for defining a business's technical variables, let's say. I stopped at about 125 variables to reasonably define what a business is, right? That's everything from, are you critical infrastructure? What's your acceptance of new technology? What's your regulatory, right? What's your maturity rate? What's your size? What's the cost of bureaucracy? How difficult is it for you to move paperwork through? You know what I mean? All of these things, it ended up about 125 things. And the reality is, if you can't consider those and don't know them yourself, you're going to make poor decisions. You're going to have a hard time. It's going to be rough. And no one considers those things. It's insanely complex to do right and really easy to screw up. So much like politicians, you can guess which way we go.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much every time. Pretty much every look, I think the challenge becomes there are legitimately the way I used to look at this and still do to some extent 'cause I want to be an optimist on some days. I can't, like as the great line once said, I can't win all the time. But the large companies, like I worked for HP, and like there was no doubt in my mind that that's not the large behemoths don't innovate. They innovate by acquisition, right? You find two guys in a garage that are doing something amazing with just this one little component or this little thing. You're like, I'm going to acquire that, drop it into it'll be rather than a product, it'll be a feature in my broader portfolio of things that actually work together. And voila, I am better now. Now, like you do something amazing, you get acquired, and like that slowly dissipates in amazingness over time because that behemoth probably won't put the energy the two guys in the garage put into it. That said, it worked for us as an industry for a while, a good while. And then I'm pretty sure I'm not allowed to go, or I'm asked not to go back to Gartner's thing in was it in DC area? What's that? The security summit or risk summit or whatever. Like a couple of years ago, I was standing there talking to some people in the booth back when I worked for Optiv, and there was a really interesting email security company. Like it was brand new company. It was like their showcase thing. It was like really interesting. And I went over to talk to the guy, and I said, "Hey, so tell me about what you do." And he explains it. And I said, "Okay, that makes sense." I said, "Who's your target for acquisition?" And he's like, "Well, CIOs and highway." Like, no. That's not the question I asked. Like, which one of the companies upstairs in the big vendor pavilion are you trying to get to buy you? And he got all offended. And he's like, "Well, what do you mean? Now we have customers and when we're well off on our way." I said, "Yeah, but like your TAM is like that big. Unless you figure out that you're part of a broader portfolio of like email security, like something bigger, because by yourself, your limiting factor is they're going to kill you in 6 months."
I would say by yourself, your limiting factor is your limiting factor is procurement.
Also that.
Right? Like I go on stage and I go, "Okay, guys, I'm 20 years CIO, CTO, CISO. Who do you think I like dealing with the least in my enterprise?" And everybody's like, "Well, it's HR. It's obviously HR. It's legal." No, it's none of those things. It's procurement. It's procurement each and every time. Why? Because they're people who work at the DMV. Like, as far as I know, every company, that's a requirement. Like, the list of skills you have to have, well, we expect to see 2 years of DMV work on your resume. Right?
Yeah.
Little bit of power, lots of problems. Right? The reason I buy from HP is because I only have to go through procurement once and I get access to the HP catalog. I buy from Cisco because I go through procurement once, I get to buy from the Cisco catalog.
Yeah, fair.
And people overlook that. And so when I ask the same question, and I ask it constantly, like, what's your acquisition strategy? And the companies that go, no, we're taking this thing public, and I go, but you're like a
hell
sliver.
You are.
It's not. No, I don't even want to buy you now. I want to buy you as part of something else.
Yeah.
Like I appreciate the technology, but no, I don't want to have to go through this. This is a mess and this is a nightmare. And then on the other hand,
you're a feature,
right,
not a product.
Correct. And then on the other hand, right, I look at the big guys and I go, whoa, did you guys talk to anybody before you did that acquisition? Like of the competitors in that space, that's the last one I would have bought. Right?
Is that because though the good ones are not looking to be acquired and so the big company is like, hey, I need this. I guess that one at the bottom of the pool there is the one willing to sell. So we'll get them, and maybe we think we can polish that up to make it better. But the bigger ones aren't looking to get acquired.
No, I think it's really complicated. But I think a big piece of it is the big ones, like the big acquisition targets, tend to be a little bit more mature, and so you can kind of fold them in, and you really only integrate them as far as the sales process. And they're mature enough to kind of continue to run. Plus, the fastest way to kill a company is to take a $10 million company and buy it and then say, now you've got a $100 million expectation for sales inside this organization.
Yes.
Yeah,
right? And they don't really have a plan to do anything with it. They just kind of force this as a discussion and go, well, this is the demand now. Okay, cool. So what are we doing to take a CEO that's now an EVP or an SVP at a much larger company that's never been a CEO before and grew this company to 10 million, and now all of a sudden they're controlling $250 million in revenue. They've never controlled $250 million in revenue. They don't have the experience to claim the maturity, and the organization's not a $250 million company. What are you doing to make that a $250 million company? And the answer actually, I think, goes back to what Raf said earlier, which is most companies aren't innovation companies. Right? I used to talk about this all the time, right? There's invention companies, there's innovation companies, and there's acquisition companies. And those are kind of the three buckets everybody fits into. I worked for Hitachi. Hitachi, I would argue, is one of the greatest invention companies in the world. Why? Because they have 116,000 patents, and no one can name 116,000 of their patents. You can't name one of the 116,000 patents. They have they have more patents for financial services than all of the big banks combined. Right? That's an invention company. How do you know it's an invention company, not an innovation company? Because they can't take any of it to market. Right? Apple, I would argue, never invented anything. Not a single solitary thing.
Yeah.
However, they're probably the long time track record. We don't need to argue about modern Apple. The greatest innovation company. Right? The iPod is the absolute perfect example. They did not invent the MP3 player in any way, shape, or form. I had 40 of them before the iPod came along. What they did was they waited until the technology had stabilized, a market was apparent, and then entered the market to solve the problem that people actually had, which was, this thing is really cool. It holds your entire music library, but only nerds can figure out how to make it work. In order for it to be adopted by the broader market, anyone needs to be able to use it. So it's actually not the device. It's the software interface that's important. They were surprised by the iTunes single thing, and then they did the same for the phone. I used to import cell phones from the UK because Orange had the best kind of pocket PC phones, right? And the ability to just pick up an iPhone and just have it work for the masses, that's innovation.
Howard, that goes back to, for me, I said it earlier on in this conversation, that's understanding your TAM, right? That's understanding what your total addressable market is from a who's going to buy this and who do I, your ICP, ideal customer profile, like who is the buyer for this? And far too many companies, whether it's a startup, and it's usually on the smaller side, right? Because by the time you get to HP size, they've got an entire army of people whose job this is to go ask analysts and do that research. But smaller companies don't have the time and energy to spend understanding who's potentially going to buy the thing that they're trying to sell. And so you get either one of two situations where you get a hilarious mismatch between, we think this is a global problem that everybody has, and it turns out like 3 people in the enterprise actually raise their hand and go, I would pay for that, which is something you said earlier. Or, right, you end up with, and I think this is kind of the more common version of that, is you're selling a solution to a problem somebody doesn't actually have, but you're forcing your sales team and your marketing team to convince them they have this problem just so they'll buy the thing.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Isn't the purpose of marketing to show you a problem you didn't know you had? Isn't that why marketing exists in the first place?
I mean, that's where it's gotten, right? That's kind of where we're at.
I'm not saying that as a bad thing. Think of the things that you just have in your house, right? How many of those things would you have if you just had to shop for them yourselves, right? Like if you had to actively get in your car and drive to a store that specialized in that thing and then buy that thing, how many of those things would you have? Most Americans would never have a wok. You wouldn't have a pressure cooker. You wouldn't have a, things that legitimately are good, right? You wouldn't have a loofah. I don't know if you're a loofah person, but you would never. No American would ever have exfoliated had we not had marketing, right?
Yeah,
that's true. I mean, look at the pharmaceutical commercials that come on TV. How many people would not be buying all that stuff if they didn't know they had the problem?
Yeah.
Right? Well, they're selling you the problem.
Oh my God, I have that problem.
right? Sometimes that's bad, sometimes that's good. And I think that's where we get into a conversation on things like late stage capitalism, right? That kind of starts this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Because I talk to a lot of venture capitalists, and what they don't actually do is understand the technology. Also,
no, of course not.
if they listen to someone who understood the technology, they'd probably miss out on a lot of unicorns, right? The connection between what this thing should do and its value as a company, or what this thing actually does and its value as a company, is not actually a straight line.
Dive into that a little bit more, because that's interesting. I don't think I've heard that theory before.
Well, investing is speculative.
Right.
Which means everyone is playing a game about how can I buy a thing for $1 that in the future will be worth $1.20.
Sure.
Well, it's not actually based on the value of the thing. It's based on the perceived value of what the thing could be. And that's the whole trick, right? So it doesn't really matter if the technology is good. If they can't market it, it'll never go anywhere.
Okay,
if they can't sell it, it'll never go anywhere. If they can't grow, it'll never go anywhere. If the CEO doesn't have alignment on what a growth strategy, an acquisition strategy, an exit strategy looks like, right? How many tech companies have you guys witnessed where it is so obvious that the CEO is way beyond their skis, but also is too arrogant to hire a professional CEO so the company can continue?
Been there.
Right.
Been there twice.
Have, right. We all have. A really good example of a company that I think did it well is the Chinese water filtration company, Everpure.
Oh.
No, it's a Pure Storage. They renamed to Everpure. They sound like a Chinese water filtration company.
Yeah.
Right. But their founder cause moved to effectively run their R&D, and they brought in a professional CEO who has taken the company, and it has absolutely exploded. Right. For the recent renaming and rebranding of the company aside. Like every CEO thinks they're Steve Jobs. They are not, because there was only one Steve. Also, let's be clear, Steve Jobs was so full of himself that he killed himself rather than recover from cancer.
Yeah,
I don't think that's the model we want to follow.
But to be fair, so many I've watched, and this is kind of a little rabbit hole we're going down here, but it's fine. I've got friends that I'm like, I've said this to, and you guys, if you're listening, you know who you are. Like, at some point, stop, come up for breath. You're going to be too old to enjoy, or too tired, or too sick, or too broken to enjoy the fruits of your labor by the time you think you're done chasing the dragon. And you know, some people can quit. Some people consider themselves serial entrepreneurs, and that's just a way of saying, like, I don't ever intend to quit working 100 hours a week. But I think that to bring this back to I think we're going to do this, and this will address this in part 2, because I want to wind this section down and say that the market is, I believe, heavily oversaturated in just about every single segment we have, whether it's the endpoint, whether it's the network, whether it's the data, the SIM, the this, the that. We have 37,000 versions of everything, and they're largely indistinguishable from each other. And I don't know that at some point, like, I know the analysts struggle to figure it out. I know the marketers of these companies struggle to figure it out. But there's some innovator, some genius in the back room that says, this is totally different than its nearest competitor because this. And the rest of us look at it and go, huh? But I want to save the follow-up to this for the next episode. So you guys, if you're listening, stay tuned. Next week, we're going to do the second part of this, and we will continue our conversation. Howard, thanks for being here, and hang tight. We'll be back next week. Guys, thanks for listening. We'll catch you on another Down to Security Rabbit Hole podcast on the next episode of this. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.